Welcome to the COSTEP podcast. I'm Gabe Puente, and I'm your host. In today's episode, it's show up versus follow up. Learn how COSTEP is stepping in as an economic amplifier for economic growth in South Texas. Listen in.
So that's going to be an interesting thing, you know.
Yeah, seeing how that goes. Gosh. Hey, well, thank both of you. Thank Matt. Thank you, Adam, for being the representative, you know, for the Rio Grande Valley with COSTEP, right? And looking into in economic growth. Talk to me. What is the effort? What do we want to do when it comes to economic growth here, and what is COSTEP's mission as you guys are going out there?
Absolutely. So, you know, looking at economic development, obviously the purpose is to increase wealth, prosperity, and opportunity for the folks in a given jurisdiction, given area of service. And so for us, the area of service is the Rio South Texas region, which, you know, covers the Rio Grande Valley plus the 3 additional counties out to the west, Zapata, Jim Hogg, and Webb County. And so for us, Rio South Texas is a 7-county region from, you know, Cameron and Willacy County on the coast, all the way up river, all the way to Laredo, Webb County area. We even look at it as also including the mirror image on the Mexican side, which is, you know, Matamoros all the way up to Nuevo Laredo. The 10 municipios on the Mexican side. And the goal of economic development, like I mentioned, is to increase prosperity, opportunity, wealth in a region. And there's various ways in which you do this. And the direction which COSTEP is taking is to look at industrial recruitment from the economic development end, specifically attracting industry to the area, both domestic companies as well as international companies that would be interested in investing in this region to grow here, and obviously through their growth, increasing the prosperity and opportunity for our folks here.
Has the area been, or let me ask this way, seems like there's so much opportunity and a lot of resources. I mean, I only know this because I'm from here, you know, but what has been, I guess, the big question as to why people don't know about this region as much as they should? I know that's a big loaded question, but you know, if you can kind of jab at that.
Sure. I'll let Am chime in on that as well, but I'll tell you from my experience, we unfortunately don't have much of a brand yet.
As a region?
As a region, you know, and locally we do, right? And to the folks that we regularly interact with, everybody knows, oh, it's the valley, or it's, you know, the region, or Laredo, or, you know, the border, or whatever term we decide to choose.
Yeah, and I can test that because I'll say McAllen, like, oh, no, well, first, whenever I'm outside of the South Texas region, I say from the Rio Grande Valley. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, like they still don't know where that is. And so I have to say cities like South Padre Island or McAllen or something like that. So I get what you're saying. Yeah, we haven't really identified, you know, what this region is yet.
Yeah, people just don't know about it. I mean, and they figure South Texas, they look at maybe Austin and San Antonio. Yeah. Back in 2020, I think it was February when we went to Europe, and people asked me, where are you from? And I said, McAllen. Well, we're 7 miles from the Mexico border. We had to really pinpoint exactly. We had to say we're at the border, 7 miles from the actual border, for them to understand the difference. So, and then they'd ask, are you close to Dallas? How close are you to Dallas? I said, we're like 9 hours from Dallas.
Yeah, Texas is its own country.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and so, you know, particularly when you look at industry, you know, in the U.S. less, though somewhat still, you know, hard to recognize, but particularly internationally, you know, when companies think about where to go to invest, and they look at the North America, right, and, you know, it's the United States, Canada, and Mexico. That's understood. If they think about where to go in the United States, it's mostly East Coast or West Coast communities, or, you know, bigger cities like Detroit and Chicago, you know, the Midwest area. If somebody's familiar with Texas, or someone knows about Texas, the first place they probably know is Houston. Next up is Dallas. You know, if they're a tech industry, then they're familiar with Austin. If they're a basketball fan, they might know San Antonio. You know, if they're a country music lover, then maybe know where El Paso is at. If they're listening to Marty Robbins back in the day. But the valley, once again, does not come up, or this region, Rio South Texas region, doesn't come up as a you know, a key point of familiarity. And so what we try to do is we try to overcome you know, that lack of brand awareness. And as Adam was referred to, you know, even on the back of our cards, we have a little map on the back of the card specifically for that reason, to be able to explain to folks, like, hey, look, this is where we're located at, to give them some kind of a reference point.
Yeah.
This is obviously a challenge, but also at the same time an opportunity, because you're able to give people different perspective. You know, the border region has so much to offer by virtue of being the border region, and the interaction between the two countries.
Have we just started? This is fairly new, right? As far as being able to brand ourselves as a region, is this like a new opportunity that we have locally as well?
You know, I think this is the next evolution of probably a long-running effort. You know, there's been several folks in this region that pioneered the regional thinking and the regional thought process. You know, going back decades. Actually, you know, COSTEP itself was founded as a regional economic development organization almost 50 years ago.
Yeah, wow.
And the idea was to advance South Texas and look at from a regional perspective. So as COSTEP, we're kind of finding our way back to our roots. And over the decades, there's been many efforts that have tried regional thinking, and not only just regional thinking, but regional doing. You know, and I think with each iteration, that effort gets stronger and better. I think that if you look at it from just a local perspective, the MPO, the regional MPO, was probably the big milestone of creating that regional thought process locally.
And what is MPO again? It's
Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Yeah.
You know, so on transportation, logistics, infrastructure. I think that was a monumental shift and a step in regional thinking from a local perspective.
Right.
And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create the same shift in terms of an externally focused perspective, you know, promoting the Rio South Texas region as one whole to the audience outside, be it domestically, across the continent, or across the world.
Yeah, I love how you say, you know, it's good that people adopt to the way of regionally thinking, but it's totally different from regional doing. You know, there's a difference between thinking and doing, and I wanted to ask, like, what can we do as local? I mean, because I believe, along with your efforts and what you guys are doing, we can get into that in a little bit. I think locally, everybody has an opportunity to help share that message, right? So whenever we are talking about this region locally, what are some things that will help, you know, the efforts of organizations like COSTEP?
Sure. I'll let Adam kind of chime in on that to start off with, and I have a few ideas as well.
COSTEP can't do it all. You know, COSTEP is relatively a not-for-profit social welfare benefit corporation. So what we're looking for is private industry to come together in the region and bring forth support. You know, and not only, you know, let's say monetary support, but more than anything, direction. Help us. Private industry needs to show the direction of where the regional economic effort needs to come together. And so that's what we're looking for is private industry to come together, share with us their thoughts, what they're thinking about, what the region needs to look like, not 2 years from now, 5 years from now, but 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. Where do we want the region to be? So that's really what this type of support that we're looking for.
Yeah, you know, being here I'm originally from here, but I moved back almost 12 years ago. I've seen a major difference in how this region has grown and how people are, you know, shifting the mindset of, oh, you know, what's good for, you know, they realize, I think everybody has, you know, us as a region, as corporations and businesses here locally have realized what's good for Brownsville, you know, which is Cameron County, the lower part of the Rio Grande Valley, is just as good for McAllen or Mission or, you know, up in the Rio Grande. Even though we're so separated, you know, we're seeing people okay with that commute, and what we're really treating this as, you know, what some may say was Dallas-Fort Worth back in the 70s is now what, you know, what the region is dealing with today.
Absolutely. You know, coming back to your question, kind of what can people do, right? Yeah. I think it's important that we share everyday life stories from this area. You know, the part of the challenge that this region faces, you know, we're not completely unknown on the outside. Unfortunately, a lot of, particularly in the last decade or two, most of the branding that we have received was quite negative. You know, because of our geographic location and because of the border dynamic and everything comes along with it, we're a great tool for politics. You know, and portraying images that do not necessarily reflect everyday life in our region. And so, Adam mentioned, what can folks do, on the private industry side. It's really, engaging in that regional dialogue, helping shape the direction. Think long term. I think that's a really key aspect here. Is not what's going to happen next year, not what's going to happen in 5 years, but what's going to happen decades down the road, and how do we want that to play out. I think that's really critical for the private industry aspect. I think from the individual resident is share your story. And share your story publicly, whichever avenue you take, and highlight some of the positives of this region, and not necessarily positives versus negatives, but just everyday life. Both of us have had the pleasure of living here and then leaving and coming back. Adam's been all over the place. Also, inside and outside the region, there's a lot of things here that we take for granted, I guess, or can perceive as very normal. Yeah. They're incredibly positive in terms of daily quality of life that you don't find in other cities. Mm-hmm. One of my recollections of living in Central Texas was that your Google Maps becomes your best friend of getting around, and you live by traffic. And that consideration, is practically non-existent in our region. We love to complain about the interchange, but realistically speaking, it's a 10-minute hiccup at best, versus hour-long waits in other parts of the country, and that's very relevant to everyday quality of life. And so, I think being able to share the great outdoors that we have, the very affordable lifestyle that we're able to enjoy here, the family-oriented culture, the very positive atmosphere in our neighborhoods. I think all these things are very important to share to create this complete image. Because when we coming back to the conversation about economic development is not just about dollars and cents. It's a lot of the quality of life, quality of place topics, because companies, when they make investment decisions, they don't just make investment decisions based upon what does the bottom line say in a forecast. Yeah. Relevant, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But a big part of that is what is our potential for the future there for years or decades, including are our employees going to be happy there for years and decades? Mm-hmm. And so some of that storytelling about the quality of place and quality of life the region offers is absolutely critical in that effort. Yeah,
I will say that we have the nicest beach in Texas. I don't know if that says much, but
no, absolutely. I mean, I will tell you, I have hosted.
It's better than not having a beach.
I even wouldn't go that route. When I say that. Let me tell you that this is actually a really good point, because this is kind of a typical example of sometimes how we look at what we have and take it for granted, and kind of diminish it slightly. I've had the privilege of hosting people from all around the world, and every time I get a chance when somebody comes down, I try to cut into a portion of taking them out to the beach. And not just taking them in town in Padre Island, but going north on that road and taking them out there onto the more or less populated areas, let's put it that way, the more wide open space areas of the beach, or taking them down to jetties and give them that experience. And absolutely everybody loves it. I am yet to take one person out there in my years of doing this who has not come back from that and said, I could see myself bringing my family over here for vacation.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
And that's a huge step, because none of these people were here for vacation purposes. Yeah. They're here on business. Yeah. But you give them that aspect, and all of a sudden they see my folks would like that. Yeah. And so going back to the discussion about the quality of life and quality of place, that's a huge mind shift.
Yeah. It is. And another, go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, just to note, a couple of weeks ago we had some people in from Florida, and we took them out to the beach, just like Matt says, all the way to the zip lines and the horses out there. And you would think that somebody from Florida, we always want to go from here to Florida, and they're saying, man, this should be nice to come down for a week and rent a place, a condo, and just spend some time here. The beaches are nice. And
so talking about South Padre Island, and talking about how we came together as a region to, for, getting SpaceX down here.
Sure.
Which is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's various projects along the way. We talked about the MPO, which was a big political step forward, and SpaceX obviously looking at this region and ultimately choosing the region thanks to the support that happened throughout the region of the different communities and organizations. I think is another great example of good things that can happen if we do come together and we leverage all of our region's assets to achieve a certain goal.
Yeah. Is that something that COSTEP, would that be like a model example of what COSTEP is trying to achieve when you're looking for, industrial partners to invest in this area?
The regional collaboration aspect, yes. Yeah. The scale aspect, not necessarily. And let me go tell you where I'm going with this. Our efforts are not primarily designed to be whale fishing. We're not trying to go after this massive project out there. I think probably the most recent example was Amazon HQ2. Okay. That's not necessarily the scale of project that we're looking at, because in most cases those scale of projects are not a good fit for our region. SpaceX worked because of our geography, because of some of our assets, because some of the facts that NASA had already evaluated that part of our region for a potential facility way back in the day, decades ago. It has been studied and found suitable. So lots of positive factors came together to bring in SpaceX. But when you think about SpaceX also, SpaceX started on a very small scale and now is scaling up as progress is made. And that scale-up model is really what we're looking at with COSTEP. We're identifying specific industries. In this first phase of implementation, we're actually looking at the mobility industry, which is, let's call it automotive plus, so things that move people from point A to point B. And we're looking at it from the aspect where we want to identify companies that are suppliers to this industry. Hopefully companies that have a binational customer base, so OEMs or major suppliers who do business both in the United States and Mexico. And we want to talk to them about investing in this region and starting off relatively small scale. A great project for me would be a company that has started somewhere between 20 and 100 employees maybe, but then has plans to scale up to 200, 500 or more down the road. And so we're looking at SpaceX not necessarily as an example of, we're going to go whale hunting for that big name, but we're looking at it in terms of the process. A small operation, beachhead operation, that then is able to scale within the region, leveraging both regional talent and attracting additional talent to the region, and hopefully building something that's going to have substance and sustainability for decades to come.
You think it'll be a challenge to come together regionally, like the region did for SpaceX, for some of those projects that you are interested in?
It shouldn't really be that challenging. I think that the one thing that make regional collaboration in terms of SpaceX maybe easier was the fact that there was just one destination they could potentially take. There wasn't multiple sites that were really suitable across the region. And so it was we either come together or we let this go situation. We're looking at it from the perspective that we're looking at projects that might be suitable for multiple locations across the region. And so there's going to be a challenge. It's going to be the willingness of everybody at the table to say, okay,
let's do this for the region.
Let's do this for this region,
even though it's not
in my backyard.
That's
exactly right.
Right.
That's exactly right. So that's going to be, if there is going to be a challenge what we're trying to accomplish, that might be it. On the other hand, going back to the discussion we had a little bit earlier about quality of life, quality of place, and the region, if you look at how we live in this area, we live regionally, right? We very few people, I would argue, in our region live in one neighborhood, have a school in that neighborhood, have the store in the same neighborhood, have the same park in the same neighborhood, and never go beyond a 4-block radius of their place. Right. Very few folks really do. In reality, we are a very mobile community, or a set of communities, a region that's very mobile, where lots of folks live in one community, work in another, shop in another, and spend their weekend somewhere else. We travel quite a bit across this region, and so I think some of that regional thinking is also essential here to understand that even if a project lands in its best suited location in community X, communities Y, Z, A, B, C, and D also benefit because of the dynamic and very mobile nature of our population.
Yeah, and we're just hoping that the city officials and the legislatures are understanding and can really relay that to their constituents, right?
Sure, absolutely, and and this is back to Adam's comment, and I'll let him chime in on that as well again. Is why we're looking at our effort as private industry led. Because we are not looking at it as, okay, there's going to be jurisdictions that are supposed to, that are competing with each other. Quite the contrary, this is a region that's collaborating. Right. And private industry, particularly private industry folks who have investments or interests across the region, understand that, wherever a project lands, it's good for them and for their business, and by extrapolation for all the communities and all the residents in the area. I don't know if Adam, if you want to chime in on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, when you go out there in let's say Europe or Asia trying to sell the region as a whole, you have a bigger, broad dimension of what you can offer. I mean, you offer Laredo, you got the logistics. Again, now we're talking Brownsville, you offer SpaceX. McAllen, you got logistics, you got warehousing. So, I mean, Mission, the same thing. So you're not just offering one city, one county, and one group of individuals and workforce, but you're offering a much broader workforce. Right. The school system. You get into the universities that are throughout the region. You got great universities here. You got great two-year colleges, and then you got prep schools that are just as good too as well. So the dynamic that you bring together as a region is much broader than just a city, a county. Or 3 counties. Now we got 7 counties as a region, so that's much more powerful.
That's awesome. So where y'all going?
So we're actually going to be hitting the road here this week. The two of us. Part of let me take a step back before we talk about where we're going. Just like the conversations like this and some of the subject matters we discussed. Economic development is not straightforward by numbers and cents. As I said, there's a lot of these soft factors that come into there. And the most critical aspect of successful economic development is relationship building. And relationships get built through in-person contact. There's various tools to maintain relationships, to maybe engage with folks, to get to know people, social media, Zoom calls, all the virtual stuff that we're doing nowadays. But really, if you want to solidify a true long-term relationship, you need in-person contact. Yeah. And so that has led us to look at our economic development strategy as an in-person outreach strategy.
Yeah, and multiple times.
Correct. And so to your question of where are you going, like I mentioned, we're starting this week. We're actually packing our bags when we're not talking to you, and we're going to Europe. We're going to attend the IAA Mobility Show, which is going to be the first and largest automotive industry show of 2021 in Europe, or Automotive Plus, because it's really going to be about cars, motorcycles, bicycles, buses, anything that moves people is going to be discussed and showcased there. Hundreds of exhibitors and companies from all around the world will be present, and so we're planting our flag over in Europe at the IAA Mobility Show in Munich in Germany. From there, we're actually straight getting on the plane and flying to the Detroit area for the Electric Vehicle and Hybrid Show that's going to be held there, the Electric Vehicle and Hybrid Show North America. That's going to be held there in the Detroit area, in Novi, Michigan, to be precise. It's also known as the Battery Show because it grew out of just the battery industry, and now, as electric mobility becomes the mobility of the future, it has really grown into another hundreds of exhibitors. Worldwide presence show, and then we'll be back in Detroit the following week, and so those are all back to back with each other. So essentially 4 weeks straight. The final stop will be back in Detroit at Motorbella, which used to be this is a new name for the Detroit Auto Show, actually held in Pontiac, Michigan this time around. But once again, a automotive industry show. In that core market and the legacy birthplace of the automotive industry in the United States and in North America. All right, so I'm sure you can relate from this from your perspective in the publishing and media and advertising industry. Is there's two kinds of folks in any industry: people who play a certain industry, and people who work a certain industry. And the difference is relatively simple. When you play a certain industry, say in economic development, right, to outreach, you show up. And if you work this industry, you follow up. And so the goal for us is to be present at these multiple shows, not just purely to show up, but be able to engage and follow up with the key decision makers multiple times in a short time frame, to create a clear perception that we're not showing up, we're not here because our job paid us for a mini vacation. We're here to work, and we're here to work for them. We're here to engage with these decision makers, and that we're serious. And so this is going to be our September. It's going to be 3 trade shows, 1 international, 2 domestic, and then we're going to be back on the road in October. Wow. I'm going to be back in Europe in October at the AFZ show in Germany. Adam will be here, actually staying in the States for the USMCA Automotive Congress, and we're going to be back on the road in November again. Yeah. So we are going to be very, very present in the market, in this industry, directly engaging with the key decision makers.
Yeah. So what is it that you guys are hoping to achieve while you're out there on these tours? I'm calling them tours. Yeah.
Yeah. So part of these outreach missions, right, to these trade shows, building in-person relationship, like we talked about, I think is very much critical. Creating this engagement, but really it's about getting substantive action out of the decision makers and the companies that we're engaging and meeting. What does substantive action mean? For us, there's really 2 measures for that, and they're closely interrelated. One is we want to convince people to make a trip down here. Selling a region remotely, right? Being out there, engaging with people, sharing videos and all that stuff, is all wonderful stuff. But really what it boils down to is a person seeing a region with their own eyes and seeing the opportunity that exists with their own eyes. So that's one. And then the second one is we would like folks to pitch us questions for a specific project, for a potential growth of their company. In the industry, it's usually referred to as an RFI, request for information, where a company draws up key questions that they have and submits it to an economic development organization like ours, asking, hey, what do you have to offer relating to these factors, to these questions that we have? And as I said, they both go hand in hand because one usually includes the other. Either it's a visit that then people say, hey, this looks really good, here's my RFI, I need to have specifics, or here's my RFI, I need to have specifics, and if you pass that first step and they're like, oh, this is really intriguing, then they decide to do a site visit and come down. And so that's really our long-term goal. Once again, it's not about showing up, it's about following up, it's about following through and doing the hard work. The outreach efforts, a lot of the outreach efforts that we're doing are going to be hard work and exhausting. Obviously, long days, lots of walking, lots of talking, lots of shaking hands, lots of engagement. But really, they're just a first step in a long-term process, and you have to stay persistent through that process to get to that visit, to get to that RFI, and hopefully get to the commitment at the end and the groundbreaking and all the fun stuff that people then see in the newspaper, on TV down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that's important to note is that COSTEP is not trying to replace any of the current ongoing efforts from current EDOs, economic development organizations, but rather complement and do above and bring projects to the table versus, replace what exists, currently exists.
So what are some things that some of the EDOs can collaborate with you all on, or how does that work? What kind of relationship are you all looking for there?
Absolutely. So, first of all, we always look for EDOs to focus on what they're doing, right, and what they do well, and promoting the communities, and promoting, by extrapolation, promoting the region, some of the assets in the region. Specifically from this project, we're going to be looking for EDOs to help us with some of the storytelling and some of the context which we'll be leveraging in our outreach efforts, in our marketing efforts, our engagement efforts. And then when we do have engagement with a company where it comes to the point where, let's say, we get an RFI, then we're going to be looking to these EDOs to assist in compiling these responses, because what we're looking to do is not just identify one site for a location for a company, but a plethora of options. Because what we clearly understand that good economic development, and particularly good work on a project, is not a win-lose situation, right? Where either you get the project or you didn't get the project. Yeah. You want to make sure that it becomes a win-win effort. And the way you make this a win-win effort is that even if in the end you're not the chosen destination for this company, you created such a positive impression of a plethora of options that company becomes another advocate for you, who may say, hey, you know what, close but no cigar, we chose somewhere else, but man, that was compelling, and that was really nice, and that was really interesting. Because guess what? People talk to people. Yeah. And so they will engage with their peers, and at some point in time, that company who told you no might tell their partner, saying, hey, you need to really talk to these guys, because they have something amazing to offer. And so going back to where can the EDOs be helpful? Number one, continue promoting, and continue being active in what you do. Number two, when we reach out, assist us with information that will be relevant for us to tell the story of this region, and really make compelling arguments along that process. And then when this recruitment process, and as the recruitment process gets to the point where we have that request for information, and that information comes out as a project to the EDOs, please put a strong effort into that response. Mm-hmm. Because that response is not just a response for that one project. That response is the business card or the presentation you make for your community for that project or many other projects down the road.
Yeah. People can follow you too, right? As you're going through the process, I think you all are going to be on the road sharing stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, if anybody's interested in how does this work out, follow us. COSTEP has active social media channels. Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter are going to be your best sources for that. And we're going to be posting regular updates and reports as we're going along. Once again, the critical aspect for us is to not just keep our region engaged and show that we're working hard for the region. And we're just not just showing up, we're following up. But also particularly engage with these decision makers in industry to tell our regional story, to be able to highlight some of these positive aspects of the region that we talked about, and to be able to actively engage and follow up and pursue projects in the region, or for our region, to overcome some of the challenge that we started off with, which is that the fact that our region doesn't necessarily show up top of mind when people think about investments in North America. And we're actively going to be working to change that.
Cool. Adam, anything? Well, I mean, we've been here for almost like 45 minutes. That's a lot of information. It's great stuff.
I mean, the goal here is to, like Matt mentioned, is to bring people down, to create awareness of the region for businesses that we do have, green spaces, we have quality of life, we have the workforce that's here. So just create that awareness and bring them down and hopefully, get them to submit an RFI, for us to submit an RFI, and then throughout the region that RFI gets answered, and hopefully, landing some sort of industry to come down and settle here in the Valley and in the Rio South Texas region.
Awesome. Well, this is going to be the first of, many other podcasts to just talk about what you guys are doing and follow y'all and seeing the engagement process and the follow-up, like you said. What's the website?
So if anyone wants to take a look at the website is COSTEP, COSTEP.org. So .org.
Awesome. Cool. Matt, Adam, awesome.
Good.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Cool.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
COSTEP, a North American solution support global partners benefiting the social welfare of Rio South Texas.